legislative agenda, we will, do you have anything?
No, I don't,
Okay,
John.
we'll just table that then in case Julie is able to attend. We'll let her jump in whenever she's comfortable. We can move on to bills.
Okay, I would make a motion that the receipts be noted and that the bills be paid as printed.
Okay,
Second.
motion and a second to approve the receipts be noted and bills be paid. Can we please have roll call?
And I'd just like to make a comment on the bills that I noticed through work of our buildings and ground people. Ed has worked with Focus on Energy, and I just wanted to note that there's $3,489 coming in from a rebate for boiler tune-up and from both chillers at Rams and Lincoln's from a credit from Focus on Energy. So it's always nice to see that rebates coming back.
We also saw when we were there last month, the recycling that they do and the monies that brings into the district. So not only keeps things out of landfill, it brings money. It's very much appreciated. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Green, can we have a roll call then?
Mrs. Hett?
Yes.
Mr. Bemble?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Next, we can move on to new business. The first item, action to approve a 2014-15 facility rental agreement with Lots of Tots Preschool.
As you know, they are hosting a 4K program that we have in the district, and they are at the pitch site. They use 2 classrooms there, and we are asking approval to renew their lease with us for the next upcoming school year, for 2014-15 school year. And speaking with the director of Boys and Girls Club, Rob, he has indicated that that has been a very nice working relationship, that things have gone very, very smoothly from his perspective, so we don't have any issues there. Dan, I don't know if you have anything else to add? Questions?
I would make a motion to approve the 2014-2015 facility rental agreement with Lots of Tots Preschool.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve the 2014-15 facility rental agreement with Lots of Tots Preschool. It was noted at a cost of $560 per month.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. No. Can I just add,
Sure.
that in then? Okay. At a cost of $560 per month.
All those in favor, please
Oh,
say
yes.
aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Yes, that is right.
Okay, next we can move on to the 2013 Friend of Education Award recipient.
I spoke with both your president and vice president of the board regarding a chef, Fred Griesbach. He is someone who has worked with, he's actually a retired chef now, but was working at Sky Club. He has worked very closely with Lynn Borski, who teaches the culinary classes at Lincoln High School. He has been a mentor to her students. He has helped to prepare them for careers in the industry, and she's had several students pursue that as a career, actually. He's organized fundraiser dinners. He's helped them raise thousands of dollars. He hosts a dinner each year. He's been doing that. The funds have gone into helping Lynn purchase items. In fact, one year he threw in about $1,000 of his own money and helped her with the fundraising dollars and his own dollars to purchase a new convection oven for her commercial kitchen. He's donated cookware, utensils, knives, aprons, cutting boards, towels, other equipment, and so on. And he's also, in the fundraising portion that he's done, assisted her students in paying for competition fees and so on. So he's worked very closely with them, and talking with John, with Mary, we felt that he might be a good candidate for your consideration.
I would move that Fred Griesbach be named Friend of Education for this year.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the 2013 Friend of Education Award to Fred Griesbach.
Is it 13 or is it 14?
14.
It'll be it's 2014.
No, it's 14.
Okay, so
Is that what I have on? Yeah.
Yeah, but he was reading.
Oh, it's 2013.
2013. Apologize for that. All those in favor? Say aye.
Well, it's the 13-14 school year.
Okay, well, it said 13, so we'll just.
But it'll be awarded in 2014,
Okay,
so.
2013-14, there. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And thank you to Mr. Griesbach for all that he has done for our students and for our district. Very much appreciated. Next, we can move on to agenda item C, action on 2014 Wisconsin Association of School Board Resolutions.
We are making a recommendation. We thought we'd open that up
Okay.
for the board discussion.
It says, yeah, as far as the resolutions, everybody had it in their packet. I don't know if there's anything specific. I don't have, basically, I've kind of agreed with everything that's been recommended this year. Last year I had some qualms with a couple, but I agree with the positions that the WASB is taking with every one of them. I'll just looking at discussion, I'll briefly read through them, and this kind of hits your public comment in the fact that we are making aware of the legislature that WASB, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, has got a very strong opinion against culture schools and that type of thing. And if you wanted to look at in here, I can show you this book.
I give her a copy.
If you want to just take this section 2.7 is all of the for Cindy to look at. So look at section 2.7, that's what WASB's position, and that's pretty much our position on those.
Thank you.
The first one is access to co-curricular activities, and basically what that's saying is that the rationale against it is that many districts have rules and regulations in to be in co-curricular activities, and what was being proposed possibly is that anybody from a charter or outside school can attend these co-curricular activities with with no regulations or anything as far as grades and everything else.
John, at the CISA board meeting, there was some people from the smaller districts object to that stance because they think that that's, if we can get them into the school, any way we can get them into the school may make them more familiar with the school, more comfortable with the school. I agree with what WASB is saying. We have the advantage of having the virtual kids coming into Rudolph, so we have it a different way. But I just wanted to bring that up, that was a concern, and I can see in a smaller district, it would be a good way to get kids into the buildings. But I think we've got the other.
Well, this is primarily addressing co-curricular, like athletics.
Yeah, but they were talking about music
It's
too,
all clubs, too,
and,
yeah.
like a musical play. They were talking about the whole thing. So.
And I guess I wonder how our parents would feel if their child missed the role because.
Right, no, I agree with what WASB's saying, but I'm just saying that is another side
Sure,
of it.
sure.
That I think the public should know about in case it makes news.
And then the next resolution has to do with voucher school accountability, which is basically saying private and parochial schools that accept state funding through taxpayer finance vouchers must be held to the same standards that every state schools, every public schools are held accountable to. And there's several of the resolutions follow that. The next one is for the vouchers. Voucher school teachers' administrative standards, and teachers and administrators follow the same standards and expectations as far as educator effectiveness and licensure standards. The next one is 14.4, which is accessibility, the applying of open meetings and public records to these private voucher schools, that they still have to follow those. If they're going to take public money, they have to follow public rules. And as far as they can't close their books, and they have to be open to the public. The next resolution again is with requirement of state assessments, the different testings and all of the testing that is required by public schools also be applied to the voucher schools if they're taking the money. The next resolution is days of instruction, so a flexible length of the school term. And what this is WASB supports legislation to allow local districts the maximum latitude to determine the number of days of direct pupil instruction using the hours required under current law in determining what constitutes a school day. WASB further supports legislation to repeal the existing statutory provisions governing the number of school days required under current law. It supports legislation to allow districts to govern only by the hours of direct pupil instruction required under current law.
John, if you can find out when they discuss this, if voucher schools have to adhere to our start date, and if they have to adhere to the number of days and hours or minutes of
That's coming
instruction.
up in a further, there's another resolution.
Well, not, but this doesn't address vouchers. This addresses public schools. And I want to know if they have to follow the same rules too on 14-6.
Right now, I do not believe they do.
And could we just go back to 14.5 just
Sure.
briefly? What that's really saying is that we don't have to administer the ACT suite twice. If we've already administered it once, that in the spring, that we don't have to do it again in the fall because it's a costly test. So I just wanted to go back to that one and clarify that a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Resolution 14.7, educator effectiveness. WASB rejects any interpretation of educator effectiveness initiatives that would limit a school board's right to review this data, to decide the data, what data is relative, and use the data for any lawful purpose in a manner consistent with preserving the legitimate privacy interest of educators being evaluated. The rationale behind this is committee advanced this resolution to allow WASB members to express a position on the rights of school boards to use the educator effectiveness data. Then 14.8 is Common Core standards to amend the resolution. The adoption and implementation, basically, WASB supports the adoption and implementation of Common Core Suite standards at all grade levels in the content areas of English language, arts, mathematics, and literacy in all content areas, which are aimed at placing all Wisconsin students on track to graduate from high school, ready for college and careers. Then it goes on, a Common Core Suite standard should be written so that it's easily understood by the public, which, as Kathy has told us, it's not very easily understood at times. WASB supports the vital role of local school board governance and local school district decision-making play in designing, developing, and delivering high-quality education services at our state for our state's school children. WASB shares concern of local school boards with federal intrusion into state and local prerogatives and opposes any and all efforts by the federal government to coerce states or local districts to adopt a specific set of academic content standards. WASB believes the U.S. Department of Education should fulfill its role as policy implementer rather than policy maker, and should perform that role as a proper recognition of local school board governance. 14.9 is the forced sale of school district building and grounds, and basically this is what they want to try to do is make school districts sell buildings so that private voucher people can get these buildings and use them. WASB supports maintaining locally elected school board decision-making regarding the use of school district facilities and opposes legislation mandating that districts must sell or lease vacant or underutilized school buildings and grounds. The rationale behind it is the committee advanced the resolution to allow WASB members to express a position in response to legislation that would essentially require the Milwaukee Public Schools Board to offer vacant and underutilized buildings to the operators of private vouchers. Schools and charter schools, the authors of the legislation have indicated they support extending the principle underlying their bill to all school districts in the state. WASB opposes the next resolution as well as for fund balances. Isn't there already a regulation for fund balance?
And what, not as far as what you maintain? You mean?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. There's a suggested
It's more for your
amount.
bond rating than in your ratings
Well,
that you keep a fund balance.
and short-term borrowing and things of that nature, but I don't,
So I
so
thought there
might be recommended.
WASB opposes any legislative or regulatory efforts to limit or dictate the level of the general fund balances that a local school district must maintain. The rationale is school districts maintain a reasonable fund balance in their general fund for a variety of reasons, including to manage cash flow and avoid short-term borrowing and associated interest costs, which we just discussed, in the periods during which detail was not received. Committee members expressed concern over the likelihood that legislators may review school district fund balances, may attempt to prescribe legislation or rules to govern the maximum size of fund balances school districts may maintain. Committee members advance this resolution to allow WASB members to express a position on such legislative efforts to dictate the allowable general funds local students may be. School districts may maintain. It's tough to say, may maintain. The next one is Resolution 1411, the recovery school districts. And WASB opposes the creation of Wisconsin for recovery school district with similar state level authority designed to take over and attempt to improve the performance of low-performing public schools. The rationale is the committee advances resolution to the delegate assembly to allow WASB members to decide whether to take a position in opposition to recovery school proposals or similar proposals that would remove schools from the governance of locally elected school boards and place them in special district that answers to a state authority, such as a state superintendent or someone else given the power of the state's legislator, which again determines that power and why. It becomes a political battle rather than a local battle. Resolution 1412 is school start date, and this is, I think, where part of yours came in, Sandy, is that WASB supports local school boards having sole authority to establish a school calendar and number of days, contract days, supports repealing the existing state statutes. It doesn't have it in there. I read it somewhere that they're adding that in there. But I'll bring that up as far as the voucher schools should have to follow the same standard or the same regulation. Must have been in one of the other things that I was reading. I thought it said it under that point. The committee advanced this resolution to enable WASB members to more clearly state their position regarding repealing the existing state statutes restricting the school start date. 1413 is safety belts on school buses, and they're amending their existing resolution basically to say that WASB opposes legislation requiring all school buses to be equipped with seat belts for students. However, WASB supports the legislation to require newly manufactured school buses to be equipped with safety belts, provided the state provides funding to defray the cost to school districts of purchasing, leasing, or contracting the new school buses with such belts. The rationale is basically a cost issue, and the committee advances resolution to enable WASB members to review the existing policy on this topic, which was adopted in 1986. In light of the changes in federal regulations, improvements in school buses and safety belts, legislation, the 2013 Senate Bill 304, that has been introduced to require all school buses weighing more than 10,000 pounds and manufactured on or after dates approximately 6 months after the effective date of the bill to be equipped with a 3-point lap shoulder safety belt. And that would be a huge financial responsibility to undertake that. And it would be the biggest question that we would have is who's going to pay for that requirement. Resolution 1414 is sharing of students by district. So WASB supports providing additional flexibility for school districts to save costs by sharing students through programs such as, and not limited to, whole grade sharing or creation of a regional high schools serving a number of surrounding school districts. The rationale is the committee advances resolution to enable WASB members to decide whether or to more explicitly express their support for specific types of programs that allow school districts to save costs by sharing students, and to further clarify the intent of existing WASB policy, Resolution 3.29, academic cooperation. Now, when the part I had, the question I had is when they're sharing students, does that mean sharing the finance part of it, or counting the student at both districts? Is that what they would refer to?
I don't have a lot of information on that, but that's what I would read that to mean, that if 3 districts decide they want to have one high school and all of our students attend it, that we still maintain the funding for our our students in our district, but that the cost is shared.
I think Elroy, Kendall, and Wilton have something like that at one high school.
Because that was a question I had, and I don't know if anybody had any like that. It's one of the things I have a note to bring up is if that sharing the students also meant sharing of the revenue as far as like we do the 66.3.
Oh,
And
all I
don't
can
know
say
what
is,
that would have.
reading these resolutions, my blood was getting to boil, because if these are things that are going to be coming up in Madison, oh my gosh, last year we were looking at just expanding vouchers to 3 large districts because they were failing, and it ended up, everybody got vouchers, even though you don't have any failing schools in your district. And if this is some of the things that is being considered in Madison, public education is in deep trouble. I mean, we're really at a crossroads, I believe. I'm scared. I'm really afraid. That's all I have to
I
say.
can't disagree with you. And sharing students, in the last resolution, they typically bring 15 forward, and they brought 15 forward. Weapons possession in the school zone, and what they're basically amending, and I'm not sure because they covered this last year, and most of it passed, I believe. But, WASB supports safe learning environments for all children free of guns and other weapons. Further, the WASB opposes any initiatives at the state and federal level that would legalize any further ability for anyone, with the exception of sworn law enforcement officers, to bring a weapon or possession of a weapon, concealed or otherwise, in school zones, or lessen the consequences for violation of existing safe school policies relating to guns and other weapons.
So they were looking at opening up the ability to carry to beyond law enforcement. So they're trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
And we did amend our policy.
Our policy is in line.
Okay, the committee, the rationale of the committee in advance, the resolution clarified the updating existing resolution, topic 6.1, weapon possession, which was adopted prior to enactment of legislation 2011 Wisconsin Act 35, permitting licensed individuals to carry concealed weapons, commonly referred to as a carry concealed weapon law, which effectively allows those with training and registration to carry concealed weapons in most settings unless specifically prohibited by law. Those are the resolutions that will be discussed at the WASB Delegate Assembly. And like I said, I take the position of what WASB has up every one of this now. This has an opinion they'd like me to express.
Encourage you to vote your conscience.
I think we have a motion to do that, to allow him to know his conscience in an area where he needs to do that. So I was so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion second to direct John to vote his conscience in regards to the resolutions presented tonight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you, John. Would we like to ask Julie to speak now
Yes.
before we move on?
Thank you for coming.
Welcome. Thanks for coming tonight.
Maureen, you gave her a copy of the WASB stuff?
Yes.
I had a copy here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And as you can tell, there's a lot going on in the legislature. Some of it positive, some of it not so positive, and some of it is, we'll see. But as your comments suggest, I mean, we've gone through, in terms of local control, gone through and looked at all the legislation that has been introduced so far this session, and there are about 4 pages of legislation introduced that would take away local control. And I think that really is a concern, whether you're a school board, county, town, city, or village. So I do think that we are going in a direction where the state really wants to micromanage what everyone else is doing. But I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. One is SB 101. I know the last time I was here to talk with you, we did talk a bit about school safety. And so I am an author with Senator Lehman on SB 101, which would increase the revenue limit for school districts that develop a school safety plan with local law enforcement. It would increase, so you have $100 multiplied by the number of pupils that you have enrolled in the school district, or $40,000, whichever is greater. So we want to make sure that school districts have the means, given some of the real tragedies that we've seen take place across the country at schools over the last number of years, to make sure that schools have the resources that they need to make sure that kids are safe.
So that would be state aid?
Staff. So, yeah, it would be outside the revenue limit, so.
We could raise it outside the revenue limit? Okay.
Yep, well, increases the revenue limit for school districts to increase the school safety plan. And that could include to purchase for safety equipment, pay for security officers, the cost of school safety measures, doors, that type of thing.
But is that state aid coming to us, or is that us raising the tax
You
levy?
would have to raise it from the locals.
The local.
Yep, it wouldn't be in new state aid. There's also LRB 2673, so it doesn't have a bill number as of yet, but it's the fair funding for our future, and that legislation is overhaul of the public school funding formula and is largely based on the recommendations that were made by School Superintendent Evers. So what I think is important about this legislation is that unlike the current formula, it takes into consideration student poverty into the factor. And we know that poverty really does impact student outcome and achievement in the future. And so this would, as part of the formula, under this proposal, it would be taken into consideration. So I'm not sure how much you want to hear about that in particular, but it does set a guarantee of $3,000 per student in state aid, and it shifts the school levy credit and the first dollar credit into equalized aid. And it also would put Wisconsin on the path to restoring 2/3 funding for schools. And it also eliminates per pupil categorical aid and provides a levy increase of $275 per pupil in 2014-2015. And then it links the levy limit growth rate to the consumer price index. So that way would allow local districts to be able to keep up with changes in the economy. So then there's some other bills that I was going to mention. I'm not sure if you want to talk about them or not. They have to do with, the first is the Career and Technical Education Incentive Grant Program. It was $3 million, and it would have the DPI superintendent work with the Department of Workforce Development and the technical college system to identify which industries and jobs had a high amount of demand, and then that would have to be communicated to the school districts, and then DPI would have to approve industry recognized certification programs, and then in those shortage areas, and then beginning in 2014-15 school year, DPI would award $1,000 incentive grants to school districts for each student in the district who successfully completed that industry recognized certification program. The legislature and the governor is really becoming concerned about, one, the current skills gap that we have in the state, but looking forward. I also serve on the Governor's Council on Workforce Investment, and I requested to be on the Education Subcommittee, and I found out today that that was granted. So Superintendent Evers will be co-chairing that subcommittee, but one of the things that is really surprising is that if you look at the state's population between now and 2030, the population is going up, but the amount of people in the workforce that are of working age is leveling off. And with the baby boomers that'll be retiring, as well as, so we'll have existing jobs that will need to be filled as those folks retire. But then as businesses grow, hopefully, that adds another problem because you need to have people to fill those new positions as well. And when you're losing people who have maybe 20, 30, 40 years of experience, I mean, you need to have employees stepping into those positions who have the education and the skills to be able to do that work without that type of, decades long of experience. So the legislature is really focusing in on workforce and training. There's also a technical excellence higher education scholarship program. So for those students who, based on their proficiency in high school technical education subjects and who enroll in a full-time technical college, they would be able to receive a scholarship that would help them go to one of the state's technical colleges. There's some other things in here that I'm not sure, frankly, if they're going to pass or not. Some of the bills that you mentioned, and they're like, there's been a bill around that would allow other either faculty or people who work for the school district to carry a weapon in school. I mean, that bill's been around for quite a number of years. And I just don't think that there's any appetite in the legislature, maybe from certain folks, but I really don't think that the legislature, especially in the Senate, that something like that would pass. So just like some of the other bills that you mentioned, some have a better opportunity of passing, while others maybe not so much. But like fair funding for our future, that's something that we're going to continue to try to push because it is really important. And as you were talking about with the voucher school program, and now with the proposed charter school bill that is out there, it would that if this charter school bill would pass, and it was just modified in committee the other day, so that would just be limited to Milwaukee. But we all know things don't stay limited to Milwaukee. So you have taxpayers paying for a statewide public education system. Taxpayers are now paying for a second system for private voucher schools that do not have the same accountability and standards as our public schools do. And then you have originally as the charter bill was introduced, that would have allowed higher education institutions and others without the approval of school boards to be able to create charter schools, which then would be the third school system in the state. And I just don't think taxpayers can afford to pay for. We had difficulties paying for one system. Now we're asking them to pay for two, one private, one public, and then this other bill now that before it was modified, it was asking taxpayers to pay for a third statewide education system. So in the education committee, the charter bill was taken up. There was a modification or an amendment that I believe was offered by Senator Olson that would just limit it to the city of Milwaukee. So UW-Milwaukee MATC would have to contract with a person to operate a charter school. And then that would allow the new charter schools to open in the Milwaukee area without the consent of the local school districts. So it was scheduled to be on the floor tomorrow, so I was kind of excited to come and talk to you tonight to see what your feelings were so that I could take those back with me for session tomorrow. But then it was pulled off the agenda for us on Friday. So I think that there's, even with the modification that was made, there's some real concerns that what that type of charter school expansion would mean for the state, and there would be a lot of pushback. There's also, as you know, a lot of discussion about Common Core standards. I was over in Sparta at a legislative breakfast, and there was a gentleman there who was had asked a question about Common Core standards, and then, you know, it was the same type of, I think, misinformation that has been put out there before about that this is something that the federal government is mandating, when it doesn't have anything to do with the federal government. It was the National Governors Association working with the National Association of School Superintendents, with the business community, to come up with these Common Core standards, because they were concerned about our ability to compete in the future, for our students to be able to compete economically. And then he was also talking about how this was part of the UN's Agenda 21. And I think that you have a contingent now in the legislature, both in the Assembly and in the Senate, who, you know, for whatever reason, they are not looking at where the Common Core standards got their beginning and genesis, and what is the reason for them. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And what was really troubling to me is that you had a special committee that was set up in the legislature, made up of members of both houses, to talk about the Common Core, and did a number of public hearings around the state. And some of the folks who were invited to come and talk about Common Core standards were the John Birch Society. And I really don't feel comfortable, and I'm sure many other people who know who the John Birch Society is and their history in the state of Wisconsin and around the nation would feel comfortable with that group coming in and telling people here in Wisconsin what our students should be learning in our public schools. And to me, I think that was really troubling. And there really is, in the Republican caucus, both in the Assembly, I think from what I understand, 3/4 of the members of the Republican caucus in the Assembly also belong to the Freedom Caucus, which is the Tea Party caucus. And then in the Senate, we have the Senate Republican caucus is kind of split between the more moderates and the more conservatives, or those who would consider themselves Tea Party. So I do think that the moderates are pushing back on the more conservatives, and that's why when Senator Farrow came out with his initial report, they made some slight suggestions, or small suggestions, to the Common Core standards in terms of, you know, ways that standards would be adopted in Wisconsin in the future. But you have Senator Buchmeier, who's also on that committee, who's saying that we should immediately suspend Common Core in the state. And that meeting of that special committee actually is going to be taking place towards the end of this week, where her suggestion will be taken up. But I really don't think that, I reached out to all of my school superintendents in the district, and I got a lot of really good feedback from the districts about, you know, how much it has already cost for districts to adopt Common Core, how they've been moving forward. For part of my district, we have a military base over in Monroe County, where they bring in, you know, you have people coming in who are in the service, they're bringing their families. They said Common Core is really nice because no matter where these children go within the United States, the majority of the states in the country have adopted Common Core standards. And granted, they're not perfect, they're not the be-all, end-all, but they are something, I think, for, you know, to bring all the school districts into some basis. And then, but what they were saying is that, so if a kid transfers in, a family transfers in, they're right in the same place where they left from their former school district. So it is really quite nice. And I do think that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we do have the skills gap in the future that is only going to get worse. And our kids need the best education that we can give them in order to be able to compete. And we're not just competing with Minnesota or Indiana. As you all know, we're competing with folks from China and India. This community knows very well the impact of globalization. And that's why I think that we really do need to make sure that we're giving our kids a really solid education for them to utilize after they graduate, and perhaps go on to higher ed or go into the workforce. But the business community needs it, and the state of Wisconsin needs it, and those students need it. So, more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Jeff?
Well, I was reading one of the reports as far as the voucher schools and what they were finding out after the first cut of people that were applying for this, that about 80% of the people that applied for the vouchers were already going to those private schools.
Their families, their parents had already chosen for those students to go to the private schools. And that's, I think, how the voucher, how the proponents of the voucher school program have sold it, is that it's to help those public school children who are trapped in failing public schools. Well, we know for a fact that the kids and the parents who were applying for their children for the vouchers, I mean, the vast majority of them are already having their kids go to a private school.
So that is being discussed and brought up, the fact that it's really not, all of the things you said weren't there to begin with, like we were basically against it to begin with, because we knew exactly that was the purpose.
Yeah, and I'm getting letters into my office now from constituents who are really concerned that the state is going to change that to say that no one, if your child is already in a private school, you cannot apply for a voucher. Because there seems to have been some discussion or some mention within the majority party that they're concerned that 3/4 of the kids who are getting vouchers were originally from a private school. They weren't in public school. And there's some concern about that. So the voucher proponents are making sure to let legislators know that they don't want any type of restriction put on who can apply in the future. So.
But the other part along with that is to make sure that if you did take any public money, whether it's a penny, whatever, they have to follow the same standards that everybody else in public finance has to.
Well, I think that's what's really important, is that there's accountability and transparency, and that public schools have to take everyone who shows up at their door. And you have to provide them the best education that you can. And I think that is really important, that if you do take taxpayer money, that along with that money comes strings and regulations, that you have to be accountable and you have to provide a really good education for those students.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Well, in the end, that's the only way you can compare. To say that one performed better than another, if it's not a level playing field, how do you have a comparison?
Right. You're not really comparing apples to apples. So.
Do you have any information since Act 10 has been passed and implemented, what effect that's having on schools of education in Wisconsin?
Well, from what I understand, that there has been a significant drop in the number of students who are part of the Department of Ed to become the new teachers of the future. And I do think that is a concern, because you need good people to be teaching kids. So
It's going to become part of that skills gap issue we have.
yeah. Well, I know before I got here, I was talking with my daughter and going through her multiplication table, and it was becoming really frustrating, and I know I would not be a good teacher because I was getting frustrated, she was getting frustrated. And you just can't learn that way. So I know I would not be a good teacher. So you do really need special folks in the classroom who have a knack and a gift for putting that knowledge in a form that students can really understand so that they can be successful. And not everybody can do that. I mean, you might know your subject really well, but if you can't put it in a format or explain it or show a kid in a way that they can learn, you're only doing half the job. So.
Well, personal note, I hope that the people in Madison understand that the laws and rules passed there come to us. And we have to put those in play, and then we have to deal with the consequences. So good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't really fall back on you until election time, and we have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and you're not the only person I've heard that from, because the legislature is really making a lot of changes for local government, and whether it has to do with voting law changes and how the municipal clerks are to carry out their duties. I mean, we have made that process so much more complex that poll workers it is so high stakes now, they're afraid that they're gonna get their name in the paper for making a mistake, that, you know, it's really hard to get good poll workers. And most of those folks, they only do it a few times, you know, every couple of years, and they're older, they're retired, and they are really concerned about that and doing things right, because that manual is now about this thick. And, you know, whether it's frac sand or, you know, a whole bunch of different things. I mean, the state has really taken a turn where they're really making a lot of changes that impact local governments, and you don't hear about the ramifications until it's, you know, there are big ripples, and you guys are hearing complaints, and then you talk to your legislators and saying these are the complaints, but it takes a while for that ripple to get back to Madison, and I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. It's making things much more difficult.
But you're making things more difficult in order for people to have more accountability and transparency in what they're doing, and why isn't that so in education?
Pardon?
Why isn't that so in education? If you're talking about the clerks and with the voting and everything, you're looking at more transparency, more accountability. If these people have to know so much and have so much at stake just to work at the polls, why isn't there that transparency and accountability when it comes to these vouchers in these charter schools and that kind of thing? Why is there a double standard there?
Right. There seems to be a double standard. And the thing is like with the voting, they're not making it better. They're not making it more accountable or transparent. What
But
they're
they
doing is
want
just
it to be easier.
mucking it up so that there's more they are making the process much more difficult where mistakes can be made, and that's, you know, and that creates more problems for folks. But yeah, it really is a double standard. So.
Have you heard anything about smarter balanced assessment, whether or not that'll be delayed?
That I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it.
Speaking of frustration,
Mm-hmm.
sitting watching a football game and I see commercials for insurance companies. And they don't give me any real information to choose which hospital or whatever I should go to. And in the end, I say, that's wasted money. How much are you spending on that to try and convince me to go to this hospital or that hospital? And we already spend double what other industrialized countries spend for our health care, and now we're going to compete and spend commercial money. I wish there were some way to stop that. It doesn't give me any more information, it doesn't help anything, it wastes money, in my opinion. Help me with that.
That might be hard because I don't know if there's
called the First Amendment,
free
right?
speech considerations or things like that. I know that we do limit, well, cigarettes are prohibited from being advertised and things like that, but I don't know why that is a special case, but I would think that there would probably be a lot of lawsuits generated by folks saying, well, they need to be able to attract.
Then maybe there should be some
patients.
transparency in how much they spend, so that when we choose an insurance provider, we can say, how
Well,
much
you
do
could-
you spend on
Are
it?
you talking insurance or are you talking the hospital?
Both, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, because then we can be a wise consumer, and if they're wasting all that money, we'll choose one that doesn't waste it, if there is one.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult. And I think you probably seeing more health insurance companies advertising because of the Affordable Care Act too. They're trying to reach out to new potential customers to tell them about how great their product is. So I think that's why you might be seeing more of that recently, just because of the sign-up period that just ended recently.
I bet there'll be one on the Super Bowl on one of those commercial
Just
stations.
turn the TV off.
Gotta listen to public radio.
We'll see.
Is there anything as school boards that we can do to help influence what goes on in Madison? I think we've been active in the past, and I feel like at times we've just been blindsided, that, we're not listened to. If they're going to do what they want to do, and the comments they get just don't matter. Is there something different we should be doing, or that's just the way it is?
It's really difficult to say. I would continue to be talking to, Representative Cruz, Representative Roink, and myself. As some of these bigger education issues, like on Common Core, I reached out to the school superintendents, and the feedback that they gave me was really very helpful. And we got some feedback on fair funding for our future, because there are some tweaks that some of the superintendents would like to see in that legislation as well. So, I think that you just continue to reach out, provide examples, how it's going to impact, and just to make sure that your message is getting out there, both to the legislator, but as well as the public, because the public has to understand too that Madison, the state capital, the legislature, we're not just operating in a vacuum, but the type of decisions that we make really does have an impact on them, and what type of education, their children or grandchildren or their neighbors are getting, because that is our future workforce. And we can't have them if the state is doing something wrong. We can't put their education on hold and tell them we'll come back in a couple years when we get it figured out, because then it's too late.
Like Katie said once, there's no do-overs for these kids.
Right. There really isn't. There really isn't.
I have a question about, when we're, again, talking about the charters and the vouchers and that kind of thing. I think that we all read this, and it's so blatantly clear to us why this is so bad for us. What's the spin on it? That how are people looking at that and saying, oh, this is a good thing? What is the spin that they're putting on this, that they're convincing people that this is a good thing? Because I can't see anybody who reads it and looks at it and really understands it that says, yeah, this is really going to be good for our state.
Outside tax.
So sometimes it is, and you have to look at too. I mean, it's really convoluted. I mean, it's all
Is there
depends on-
anybody in education who looks at it and says this is going to be beneficial to our children?
Well, I think it all depends on which side of the education coin you're on. If you're on the private voucher schools, they're saying that this is a good thing. And then if you're on public school, you're saying, well, it would be if they had to meet the same standards as we do when we accept taxpayer money. So, I just, it is something that's ideological. There is a real difference. And I think the folks who have recently become elected are much more ideologically bent on some of these things. And, it can be difficult. I mean, so even when you present them with facts and figures, some people will just continue to look through very narrowly and only accept what fits into their wheelhouse. And we come across people like that, I think, in whatever career you're in. but we have those in Madison as well. So it can be very difficult sometimes.
Do you get tired of fighting that?
Well, some days it can be really frustrating, just like as I'm sure as a member of the school board. It can be equally as frustrating for you, and it can be. But then also, you know, you look at what is at stake, and I think that's why people continue to push, you know, for, I think anyway, making the right choices and helping to move the state forward. Some people are not going to agree with that, and I think that's one of the issues that we have in the legislature, that people are really, I mean, it's just like the state, they're really polarized. And it's getting more and more difficult to try to work across that and to come up with a compromise, because even if you do, the chance to get that compromise passed is really difficult. And so I'm hoping that we'll see some changes in the future, whether it's redistricting reform, because when districts are drawn the way they are, people even get more entrenched in their ideology, and it makes it hard for them to work across the aisle, because they're afraid then that they'll get a primary from either the left or the right. And you know, so that those type of things matter. And it's that there's a lot of, I think, reforms that need to be made to try to bring some common sense back to the legislature.
Good luck with that.
Well, I think it's important. I think people are seeing it out in DC as well as in Madison that you know, what happens when there is really deeply entrenched ideology both on the left and on the right, and it prohibits people from working together, which is what many constituents want, and you know, from being able to get things done. I mean, even with, if you look at economic development and job creation, most legislators ran on creating jobs and helping the private sector be able to move forward. But we have had very few job creation bills that have passed this legislative session. We've had a few more that have dealt with workforce issues, but there's a split in the Republican caucus, where on job creation they think tax credits or things like that are playing favorites or creating an unlevel playing field. So they don't believe the state should be doing any type of assistance to help businesses. And that's just, I can understand their point of view if we lived in a perfect world where no other state, no one was doing anything, but we know that there are different tax incentives and programs to help businesses either start or expand. And it's not realistic. And so that's the battle that they're currently fighting out. That's why we haven't seen a lot of job creation bills pass. We've seen a lot of real controversial bills taken up. And so that has kind of filled that void and that vacuum. But that's not what people elected us for. They elected us to try to help create new, good-paying, family-supporting jobs, and that's really not what's happening.
The key one was right here in our district with the no common sense on the state information vendors.
Yeah.
And with Skyward and everything else, and the fact that everybody's telling you 75% of the districts are already using Skyward. Where is the sense that you would pick one vendor?
Right.
When every other state they have done, I mean, I think Texas had 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have preferred vendors.
Yeah, but they have 4 choices, and even North Dakota had 2. I mean,
Right,
so.
right. Well, it just goes against common sense principles of even, you know, capitalism. You know, you get better competition and prices and everything if you have some competition in there. So, but at least we got people to realize that was a mistake, And then we were able to change it, so.
But I would just like to say thank you for what you do, and thank you for taking time from your family to be here tonight. But given what you said about the multiplication tables, it might be a
Yes.
good break for you.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back. My mom was gonna do the 20 minutes of reading with both of them, so,
We'll be back
and
on
then we'll have to work on multiplication.
I would just reiterate that, you know, as a superintendent, my concern is for the, same as the board, for our district. Often it comes down to finances, and we're being asked to do so much more with so much less. And, you know, at some point, you know, we're seeing not only are the schools of education seeing fewer applicants, we're seeing teachers leave the schoolroom because it's very frustrating, not only with the initiatives, but we continue to give, you know, the minimal raise that we can give. We're hacking away at benefits and things. And I know that's throughout and everywhere. And, you know, it's not just in school districts, but it's becoming very challenging to not only maintain really good employees, and we have really good employees in this district, and we have very good programs, but we're getting to the point where, you know, where else are we going to take it from? And so I'm glad to hear you say that fair funding bill is still out there and that that's still being looked at. I'm just hoping that as legislators, you know, talk and look at things and new initiatives and new rules, and that there's always a consideration of what's the cost going to be and how is the district going to afford that. I'm concerned about the educator effectiveness piece, for example, where I am certain this year we have the license paid for. I'm certain we'll be paying for the license on our own in the future for the Teachscape portion of that. And I say that only because the DPI was given the ability to charge for that use of Teachscape, and while they're funding it this year, my concern is that we'll be paying the $36,000 out of our pockets next year, and that's a teaching position. So we're being told we have to, you know, do educator effectiveness, and yet then we're also going to pay for it. And it's not just the Teachscape; it's, you know, just the whole educator effectiveness piece. And there are so many initiatives, and while so many of them are very good and have very good information, and we can try to blend them together, and our director of curriculum does a nice job of showing us how the pieces fit. It's challenging and frustrating, you know, I think for educators at this point in time, and for school boards who try to do the best they can for their employees and don't always have the means to do it. So
No, it can be a very frustrating situation, especially when you have good employees who are looking at other opportunities. And they can vote, and they can do that by leaving and voting to go work for someone in the private sector, depending on their skills and education and things like that, or another school district. So that's why I hesitate to bring this up. But I was over at Sparta on Friday, and I forget the name of the program that they're running. I can get it to you if you're interested. But they were doing this was the second meeting that we had of a technical education summit. So they were bringing in business people from around the community to talk about the future needs and how the school district can work better with the business community. But part of that was a presentation by UW-Richland, where they are working with some of the teachers. They have it's history, science, so history, biology, music, and English, where the teachers, some of the teachers in those areas are accredited through UW-Richland Center because they have a master's in their area, and they meet the accreditation requirements for being a faculty member at UW-Richland. So the students are able to get, so it's different than youth options, but the students are able to go to take basically a semester's worth of higher education or class. The student pays, I think it's $100 per credit. So if it's like 3 credits.
Dual enrollment?
Yeah, it's dual enrollment. But, so if you have a 3 credit, like biology class, the student would pay that $300. It doesn't cost the district anything. And the kids get a taste of what college is like while still being in that nurturing environment of high school where it's more supportive. So I'm not sure if that's...
We have that in an English class.
Really?
Marshall.
Oh, wonderful. So,
With UW Wood County.
okay,
Some
wonderful.
English courses.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I was trying to get a handle on, is how many of the school districts around the state are doing something similar, and they weren't sure.
We do a lot with transcripted credits. We work with Mid-State
Okay.
pretty heavily, I would say.
Very heavily.
So,
Yeah, because what we were looking at is for those students who are, especially if they're low income, $300, or because they also, I think, have a 5-credit course, would be $500. You know, they have a payment plan, but if that might be difficult. So maybe we're looking at, depending on how many school districts are doing something like that, if there would be an opportunity to do scholarships for, students who meet a certain, income level, whether it's free and reduced lunch or something like that. But I know at the high school level, more those students they don't fill out the forms, so you don't get a real
Why would they be able to get student financial aid for that?
The federal government doesn't allow it because you have to have graduated high school. So you can't get financial aid while you're in high school for that. But they said that they had a student graduate who's now going on to Madison and will have 18 credits already taken. So they start in freshman year and go from there. And so they said it's been really effective. This is their second year. First year they had 48 students, now they have 60. And they're looking to grow after that. So it might be a way, especially for some of the teachers, if they do have that type of accreditation, it might be a way to, kind of help keep them attached to the school district, I don't know if they get paid anymore or anything else, but I know that they have to have their syllabus looked at and their course and everything, so. But when you look at how much student debt kids are coming out with now when they graduate from college, this might be a way, if they can get credits for high school as well as for college, it might be a way to help them get out of college or technical college earlier with less debt and help ease their transition from high school into higher institution of higher education. So.
Julie, I think that what's not being, maybe you're discussing it, but the money is a big part of it, but I think what a lot of our teachers, the frustration is in the fact that they're not appreciated. They're not respected. And it's apparent with some of the legislation that goes through that they just think teachers don't deserve certain things, or that they're just disrespected. And I think that that's as important as the money issues that are coming through, because the money is what's showing them that they're not appreciated and they're not respected. And I think that that's something that our legislators need to understand, that goes a long way with as far as trying to attract teachers and maintain our teachers. They're really good and they're good at what they do, and why don't people respect that? Why don't people appreciate that? They're so underappreciated.
Right, and I do think that there is that sentiment. I think you have had for probably maybe certainly been the last 15, 20 years where you have had certain people really demonized for political purposes, and even when it's not warranted. And I think that what's really important is that people have to realize that even if they might grumble about this or that, we can all remember a really bad teacher that we didn't like in school, but I'm sure we can all remember a number of teachers who we really loved, and I still see a number of them when I go to Lowe's or Menards, and from my school experience. And I just think that we have to look at it as the people who are in our classrooms right now. are teaching our kids who are going to go on to be future doctors and police officers, elected officials, and the quality of the education that they're going to get is really going to help shape the future of our state. And, you know, I think that people just need to look at that. If you make it difficult for folks where they can vote with their feet and go do something else, I mean, you can lose a lot of really talented people, and the kids' education will suffer for it. So, and that's not what we want.
And I've typically been confused about what is trying to be, what are they trying to fix? In many cases, because we're doing quite well in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
There's always room for improvement, but.
Right. There's always room for improvement, but I do think that, you know, schools have been operating under limits for how many years now?
115.
You know, so over 20 years. You mean, in that, and we all know everything else has gone up. You know, so the system is under a lot of stress, and you try to do the best you can with what you have and what taxpayers can afford, and it can be really, really difficult. And then when you add some of these other things in there that, I mean, from my own personal point of view, I think are more politically and ideologically motivated, it only makes things much more difficult than they need to be. Where we should be working together to figure out how we can make sure that, you know, every student in the state of Wisconsin gets a good education. And how do we pay for that? And what type of skills and education base do they need to be successful? I mean, and
That's really it.
yeah, and that's, you know, can be really sometimes very difficult. I mean, I would love to see for Wisconsin to do more with early education. I think that we need to be doing more. Some of my colleagues in the legislature think that 4-year-old kindergarten is just a babysitting program that's sponsored by the state. Well, the brain research shows you that that 4K program is very important. And when you look at other states who have earlier programs, especially those where English is a second language, or there's poverty issues, I mean, the earlier you start, the better those kids are when they are able, when they come to kindergarten, they are better able to be right there and start. And so what I'm hoping we're going to be able to do, and I've started to work on building a coalition in the legislature, is to do more with early childhood education, because we hear from the business community so many times that the soft skills are missing when kids come out of school. They don't show up to work on time. They aren't able to work with others well, or think outside the box and solve problems. Well, a lot of that you get from early childhood, and if you can build those type of skills in, that helps all the way through. And so I'm participating in the National Council of State Legislatures Early Childhood Learning Fellows Program. They just finished up, and we have a seminar next Tuesday or Wednesday that is bringing in one of the gentlemen from the Federal Reserve Bank over in Minnesota to talk about the link between early childhood and economic development, and how, that's the age that we really should be learning or focusing on, because when you look at the brain research, it's from birth to about age 15. About 6 years old, the brain is wiring incredibly fast. And then after that, it slows down and it starts paring back. But it's still up to about age 15. And then there's a gap until about the early 20s. And then it wires again, and then after that, it's much harder for people to learn new things. You can still do it, but, so we're trying to figure out, how to focus on early childhood learning doing what we can to be supportive of that, but putting it in a context that people will understand. And we know from the brain research that, good early childhood education really helpful for economic development in the future. So, but
Sets the stage.
yes, it does for everything else. So, but I know you have a long agenda, so I'm sorry to go on. But
Oh, we went ahead before you got here.
Julie, thank you for coming in tonight and keep up the good fight. We really appreciate what you do in Madison. And you're welcome to join us anytime. So,
It's
thank
wonderful.
you.
Well, just feel free, if you see something coming through that you either like or dislike or have mixed feelings on, please let me know. And I also encourage you to continue to do that with Representative Krug, Representative Ruink, because I do think it's important that we understand how individual bills will impact the school districts in our district, so we can make the best decision in terms of how we vote. And
They too have been invited, we're taking you one at a time. Last year we did all three of you, but.
Yes, and that can get very long, as you see with me tonight, so. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we can move on to agenda, or item D under new business, action to approve implementation of increase for custodial maintenance and computer technician employees.
The Personnel Services Committee underwent a series of negotiation sessions with the custodial maintenance and computer technician employee group that began dated back in June of 2013. Unfortunately, after a series of sessions, we were not able to come to an agreed upon increase.
Sorry.
That's right.
You saved me, though, from making a trip back for my purse.
Multiplication.
Thank you. I'm thinking 8 o'clock is bedtime. That'll be about the time.
Thanks, Julie.
Sort of right.
It's okay. As I was indicating, both groups during that process concluded our series of sessions agreeing that we were at an impasse, and as a result of that, we're bringing forward then a recommendation to impose a 1% pay increase for the custodial maintenance and computer technician employee group. That would be for the 13-14 contract year, which would be effective July 1 of 2013. So we would be doing retroactive pay for whatever increase would be implemented by the board. And if there are any questions from board members, I'll take them.
So here are no questions, I will make a motion to implement a total base wage increase of 1% for the custodial maintenance computer technician employees for the 2013-2014 contract year, effective July 1, 2013, with a distribution to individual employees to be 1% above their base year hourly rate. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to implement a total base wage increase of 1% for the custodial maintenance and computer technician employees for the 2013-2014 contract year, effective July 1, 2013, with distribution to individual employees to be 1% above their base yearly hourly rate. Would we please have a roll call on that?
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Hett?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes. Thank you, Maureen. Okay, next we can move on to E, action to approve entry-level wage rates for custodial maintenance and computer tech employees.
The board has the discretion of setting entry-level wage rates for new hires that occur. Provided for you was a spreadsheet that outlined a proposed entry-level wage rates for the custodial maintenance and computer tech group that is being recommended by administration that we implement to take effect immediately. What is being proposed in what was put together here is a recommendation that we take the last established starting wages that were in place when the last CBA concluded on June 30th, 2013, take those rates for those individual assignments and increase that by the 1% that was comparable to what was just approved for an overall wage increase for this group for the current contract year. That would be denoted on the far right column of the chart that you have, and the dark shaded column on the far right. Again, those rates are based upon a 1% increase of where the wages were established with the last CBA. In addition to that, the administration is recommending that we implement a starting rate such that the new hires would be paid 95% of the wages that I was just referring to. The new employer, new hire would be paid 95% of that rate for the first 180 days of employment for this group. One thing that is new is we have established a new position within this group identified as cleaner. That's the first position listed at the top of that chart. We wanted to start with that at the $15.50 rate. We have had one new employee that was hired this past fall, started in October. Without having this finalized and in place, we did start that individual at the $15.50 rate, and that individual will continue at that rate for the rest of the contract year. And as far as what happens beyond that, for that individual will be determined with the next contract year. If this were to be approved, that position and any of these positions that may be hired new, past approval, if approved, would be operating under that starting wage, which would be the middle column. We have not had any other new employees hired in this current contract year since July 1 outside of that new position. So all of the employment positions you see listed here, we have not had any new hires, so this really hasn't impacted anyone since the close of the CBA. And I'll take any questions if there are any.
This is pretty similar to the same thing we did on previous.
Yeah, this falls right in line with what was proposed and approved by you for the clerical aid group as well as the food service group.
I move to approve the entry-level wage rates as presented for custodial maintenance and computer technicians, employees, including the information that you had relayed to us on the sheet.
Second.
Okay, motion is second to approve the entry-level wage rates as presented for custodial, maintenance, and computer technician employees. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we can move on to action to approve shift differential wage as supplemental pay for custodial and maintenance employees.
Previously, under the CBA that the district had with the custodial maintenance and tech group, a shift differential wage was included in that agreement. Under Act 10, now that we are outside of having a CBA and operate under a handbook and the district working under the limited permissible items of negotiation, a shift differential payment or wage would be included or would be considered to be supplemental pay. To include something of this nature would require additional board approval. Having reviewed what was allowed previously and discussing this not only as an administrative team, but having met with representatives from this group, we are bringing forward a recommendation that the board approve a shift differential wage allotment of 15 cents as a supplemental pay available to employees in this group that work within the second and third shifts. And that time range as listed, and I apologize for not mentioning, there was a second sheet that was made available to you for your review titled Shift Differential, and it outlines details that would be included in allowing this 15 cent per hour supplemental pay option titled Shift Differential to employees. Again, that would be for second and third shift employees, which is allowed for those working during those time periods, 3 p.m. and beyond or up until 6:30 a.m. Shift differential would not be applicable to individuals that have a regular first shift or daytime shift. When circumstances would occur where they need to work beyond that shift, if it were to include and go past 3 p.m., it would not be applicable for that time period. They would be subject to overtime as normal and overtime only. There are some other items that are referred to in here just to provide some additional clarification when this would and when it would not apply. There are circumstances that do come up where we have individuals that would normally be working a second or third shift, but we do change that shift to the daytime hours for a variety of reasons. Most typically, this occurs during the summer. Without students in the buildings, we move all of our custodial employees that might otherwise be second or third shift to daytime, with exceptions to where, on occasion, there will be a couple of employees who have requested for personal reasons or whatever their schedule is outside of work, have asked to work a second shift. If that fits the maintenance needs and work needs that we have in the summer, that will be approved by the Buildings and Grounds Director, but with the understanding that the individual will not be receiving that shift differential. We do have circumstances that pop up, like with our professional development days. We have one coming up next Friday where it's a non-student contact day. There's good reason to have these employees working during the day. We will move their shift up. If under those circumstances, they again would not be receiving the shift differential if by board discretion or administrative discretion, their shift ends up being adjusted. There are a few other examples that are referenced or alluded to here. We have a number of circumstances that pop up where we need to offer our custodians weekend assignments, for example, outside overtime assignments. We have the home show in the field house and we need to have a custodian on duty. We have a dance on a Saturday evening. We have a wrestling tournament on a Saturday. Those positions are offered out as additional overtime assignments. Those assignments would not be subject to the shift differential. It falls outside of their normal work assignment, and the individual is already having the opportunity for overtime by picking up those additional assignments. The other reference to mention here then would be that when circumstances arise where the individual is receiving compensation but not actually working, like vacation, holidays, sick leave, funeral leave, etc., those periods also will not include the shift differential by the recommendation that is presented here. And I think that pretty much covers it, unless, Ed, if you can think of any other examples that I've not
No, I think
referenced here.
this is pretty cut and dried. Actually, clearer than it was, I think, in the CBA.
Well, if we're not hearing any discussion, I would make a motion to approve the 15-cent per hour shift differential as presented as supplemental pay for the custodial maintenance computer technician employees retroactive to January 3rd, 2014.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and a second to approve the 15-cent per hour shift differential as presented as supplemental pay for custodial maintenance and computer technician employees retroactive to January 3, 2014. Corinne, could you please have a voice vote on that?
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mr. Krings?
Yes. Thank you, Maureen. And last, we have discussion and possible action to approve the number of open enrollment spaces available in the schools, programs, classes, and grades at WRPS for the 2014-15 school year.
This is another one of the acts that Julie was referring to. I believe this was Act 68, and it was put in place sometime last year prior to the February open enrollment window because we did not act on it last year. The new provision requires a district to set limits of class sizes or pupil-teacher ratio, some sort of published, established something for all of the grades and programs. to deny any open enrollment application for space purposes. We used to be able to calculate space purposes based on some of the department's guidelines and formulas for special ed. And there were times when programs were full and you could deny based on space if you had those set. Now it requires the entire district to have limits set for every grade level. So this is a first attempt at this, to even look at it. And the form, the very first page, first 2 or 3 pages of that package that you just got is an actual denial and appeal form that instructions from the department say, if we're going to do this, we should use to calculate and publish all of these numbers, because they're what you're going to have to use to defend a denial if you would make one based on space. The district has always taken in all of the open enrollment applications that have come in up to this point. For the past few years, we've had some declining enrollment, but the special ed population has not declined. We've remained steady or constant in numbers, which actually puts us going up in percentages. I think when I started here, we were somewhere around 12.5% of our student population. We are now slightly over 14%. So the number of students district-wide has started to come down, but it has been a little bit more taxing, and we've had increases on our case managers. And there are some levels in some programs that are, by calculations that I've used and get to later, that are actually full. And sometimes it would mean hiring a completely new teacher and opening up another section to even take 1 or 2 open enrolled students. So we talked about this in our central office administrator meetings and decided to go ahead and look at setting some class size limits for open enrollment for those types of purposes. One of the things the directions made us do was to take a look at policy that was already in place in how you grant guarantees or preferences. On the bottom of that first page, it says school board policy for section 4. And it simply asks you to state, does the board's policy allow the board to consider and count in their spaces class size limits or pupil-teacher ratios, enrollment projections, or other? Our policy is very open on that. In fact, now that I'm looking at this, I think we probably should check enrollment projections also, although the instructions don't say to use those both at the same time. That makes a whole lot of sense. And does it allow us to guarantee currently attending students that are here under open enrollment, or do we just give preference? Our policy actually says that we count in our head count to establish class sizes, students who are currently attending under open enrollment and those who are attending under other agreements such as the 6603s. So all of the numbers on the second page that you'll see include currently attending special open enrollment students and students attending under 6603s where tuition is paid by another district. You go to the second page now. They've asked that districts declare these class limits at the January board meeting. And in the instructions that I was looking at, they even wrote in, like I wrote in, that this next question, do we require or permit the board to approve applications from currently attending pupils? Yes. Siblings of currently attending pupils, or both currently attending pupils and siblings of currently attending pupils? We count currently attending, and we guarantee those people space for the next year. At least we have been doing that, and would recommend continuing to do that. We don't count at this point in time siblings of currently attending students because that information isn't always there. And we really can't do any accurate establishing of numbers if we really don't know what is going to be coming. But we can grant preference. So the second question indicates that we grant preference to siblings of currently attending, And the third one just guarantees that our policy says that if we have additional space, that we fill it by random selection from the applications. Not that there's any other way of picking. Everything has to be randomly, so we give preference to the siblings. But once that preference is given, and we've got this other batch of applications, if we have more applications in space, we have to do random drawing. So those are those pieces on the form. The next step really goes into the actual numbers. Elementary was rather easy. 4K, it says someplace that the number of 4K students would be 17 per section. Grades K3, because we have SAGE in all of our classrooms. SAGE is statutorily regulated at 18 per classroom. So the number for each grade level, K first, second, and third, would be 18. And then through discussion with the different administrators, a maximum class size of 30 in grades 4 through 12. Nobody would really want to see more than 30 students. We don't run 30 students in all of our classes, but we chose 30 as a number that if we had to hit a limit and say enough is enough, 30 would be the maximum for those grade levels. So I went through and got section numbers and attending numbers and then capacity numbers, which is the bottom table for every one of the grades that we have in the district. What you see are the class size limits, the number of sections that we have or would have, the capacity of those sections if they all had either the 17, 18, or 30 students, the current enrollment, because another something they changed for this year is that applications are coming in on this year's grade level, not what grade they're going to be in next year. So I had to kind of rechange all of my thinking to keep it in line with all of this stuff. Yeah, this is unreal. It does say it includes the currently attending students, that little box is checked. That's how many we have enrolled, and then new spaces at each grade level for non-special education or regular education students for open enrollment would be that very last column for each of the grade levels. And there's a lot of stuff that went into this, but kind of that's it in a nutshell, which gave us the bottom table. The next two pieces,
I just want to interject for a minute. So primarily what this is we're looking at the number of seats we have available for our open enrollment. And it only applies to that February through April time period. It is not the year-round open enrollment piece that it applies to. This is really just saying out there, if as a parent I'm looking to see if you have space in a kindergarten, well, if I apply, chances are pretty good that I'm going to be able to get in it. We've never had numbers like this apply. But we wanted to have a formula that was consistent across the board when we calculated what those numbers would be. So again, it's our first shot at it. We don't know how it's going to all work out, but we think it's a pretty good estimate. We probably won't fill all those slots.
No, looking at the past 2 year
open
actual
enrollment.
numbers coming in at each grade level, the highest number that applied at any particular grade level over the past 2 years was 14. And that was a preschool, like for 4K. There were 11 that applied at 11th grade, I believe, the year before last. And that would have been the highest secondary number at just one grade level, 11 students. So the numbers here are really allowing for a lot of spaces and a lot of incoming because we could accommodate that.
Did you change the 8th grade number from 14 or no? No, you did not. We're keeping that at 14.
I think so because
Okay.
we've never had 8th grade, like maybe 5 or 6, 7. I don't think 14.
And again, these are strictly open enrollment. It does not account for
Move-ins.
move-ins. So.
If we had 14 open enrolled people to 8th grade, because they don't open enroll if there are residents and they're attending private school, like our parochial students. They just come in as residents, so they wouldn't be in these numbers. This is people coming in from other districts. It doesn't include virtual either. Okay, so we took virtual out of the mix. The next 2 pages are applying, and I gave you the DPI caseload information sheets that I used, and the instructions, although on the actual spreadsheet, I have put little comments into certain boxes and put in actual equations that I used to do some calculations because some called for averages. This is what our special ed programs look like from 4K all the way up through senior high school. And it's listed by case manager because we kind of talk in terms of caseloads. Our case managers take care of students at the elementary building, grades K5 to 5, and across grade levels at some points in the secondary building. So I can't separate this out by grade level. So it's by case manager. The first column being a recommended caseload limit. The second column are the number of students that we have assigned to that caseworker now. And the last column is spaces that would be available for incoming open enrolled students. And you can see quite a difference in these 2 pages versus the regular grade levels where there's lots of places to slide them in and lots of seats to be filled. But with current staff and current enrolled numbers and guidelines for caseloads based on, they're even leveled by 3 levels in terms of minimal amount of instruction and pull-out time needed to a moderate to a very comprehensive programming for special ed. So I tried to account for all of those pieces in here too. And a lot of our teachers have more than one disability area, so that calls for averaging what they recommend on the DPI sheets from the different areas. This piece took a little while, but I can answer any questions that you might have on either one of these sheets. It looks like a lot.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. This goes back to what we were talking about with the legislative part, is again common sense and making educated people legislators making laws and rules and have no idea what they're doing until this stuff has to come out. The fact that we have to spend this much time filling out a form for everything is the fact that, again, what we're trying to educate our children, but yet we have to spend money, and now probably had to add staff for all of the reporting.
No, not yet.
Well,
but this
to a point
is,
we have, but all of the reporting that they've required everybody to do with all of the new, the RTIs, the Common Core, everything that's come out of Madison and the federal government is taking away dollars from teachers, again, to teach our children to do paperwork. Something that's just common sense is that if they want to go to your school district, let them go to your school district. That's the type of thing that, or...
Well, here's a situation where you might stop and just think, though, and it could happen. You have SAGE, and we've been fortunate that SAGE has balanced off, and we have not gone into the red for any of our SAGE classrooms. But you could have an anomaly of all of your little seats filled at first grade, and you have an open enrollment application coming in that's going to put you 1 over that 18. You must, at that point in time, if you take all of the students that are applying to come in,
I'm not saying that.
but this is where this exercise in futility, I'm sorry, would end up maybe helping you, and I'm not sure if we were going to even have any applications.
Well, in the past, if the spot was filled, you denied it. I mean, if you didn't have the opening, we denied it.
Yes, and you had some.
we've never denied an open.
But I mean, if it would have been mean we had to open a whole new, hire a new teacher for a stage SAFES class for 1 year, or, for one extra student, I don't think we would have done that.
Well, and.
Or get the waivers, I mean, we got waivers. but we
And
didn't.
students appeal, when you open enroll, you open enroll to a district.
Right.
So if the 18 had been filled, we would have offered them a different location than what maybe their preference was.
And that happens pretty commonly. You know, we had that with staffing last year. We had open enrollment at the elementary level requesting a specific building, and it would have put us over SAGE numbers. So we said, well, we'll take you, but you're going to go to this building instead.
Right, but I'm saying if all of them across the first grade in the district happen to be sitting at 18, and it wouldn't happen. I mean, this open enrollment application period is in February for 3 weeks. We mess around with all of the different things that they require in this process until June, when parents are actually getting their official accept, deny, and have to return to us, the student will attend. I mean, this is a pretty long process. Wait a minute, it's not even February, it's April now, the end of
Well,
April.
it's February, March, and April.
So it's a longer period, but what usually tips us over in SAGE numbers are registrations and people coming in the fall. Generally, when we have this during the open enrollment period, it's not going to happen where all of them will be at 18 and one open enrollment thing could tip us over, but in small districts, who knows? I mean, we cannot, in the special ed department, we cannot deny on space at all if we don't establish these class limits for the entire district. That's the one thing that is new. We used to be able to do that. And districts had been, because we don't have as many programs and as many staff as we do to handle the regular population of students that need just general classes. And as you can see, there are a few zeros at secondary levels where if we get more students in, we'll have to get more staff here with them. I mean, we wouldn't have to, but we could just spread everybody even thinner than they're already spread, and we all know how we like that. I mean, I don't like to do it, it's not good for the kids. So, other questions on this at all?
I would move we approve the number of open enrollment spaces available at each grade level and special education caseload as presented in the 2014-15 school year.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the number of open enrollment spaces available for each grade level and special education caseload as presented for the 2014-15 school year. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, with that, we are adjourned, and the members that are going to the convention, enjoy and bring back lots of good information.